right, guys, welcome to another episode of Side Quest Podcast, the unofficial podcast of Fitocracy. I'm pre-recording this today because I have a great interview for you guys, but I only had 60 minutes with him, so I wanted to make sure I got all of it because you guys know sometimes I can ramble. But anyways, my guest today on the show is a writer, a photographer, and a former 2008 ESPN Academic All-American for baseball. He has written for the Business Insider, Entrepreneur Magazine, Huffington Post, many things he has written for out there. But he's a master of habits. He believes if you can master your habits, you can master your life. He's a big fitness guy and talks a lot about that in a lot of his work and how he has built the habits of sustaining himself physically and staying fit. But habits are a big part of life, so I wanted to reach out to him and get him on the show. His name is James Clear. You can find him at jamesclear.com. So I hope you guys enjoy the show and what I have set up for you today with James. Again, please head over to iTunes after the episode. Leave us a little review. Hit subscribe. Helps us move up the charts. You can find us as well on Twitter at SideQuestFM. You can find us on Instagram as well at SideQuestFM. Go to Facebook and search for SideQuest Podcast. You can find us there as well. The website is changing a little bit. You can still go to sidequestpodcast.com and that will get you to the page. But the new website is sidequestfitness.com. I'm working on launching my online coaching business. So everything now is in one place. Go to that the main page. You can go to the podcast up top. If you want to check out about coaching and email me on that. I'm there as well for that. But I hope you guys enjoy this interview with James. It's very enlightening. So without further ado, enjoy the episode. All right, guys, I have a great guest here today. You heard on the intro who he is, but I'm going to let him explain a little bit about how he got to where he is in life and became an entrepreneur, a travel photographer, and a weightlifter. But again, I have Mr. James Clear on the podcast today. James, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So with your history, I gave the listeners a little bit in the intro. How did you get into fitness? How did you start developing habits? Like what did it just click one day and you were like, this is how I make life better? Or were you always kind of like good at building those type of habits?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I was doing some things that helped me before I really realized that, these are the habits that are driving progress and sustained change for me. So my background was as an athlete. Growing up, I played a bunch of different things. I ended up playing baseball all the way through college. My dad played baseball in the minor leagues with the St. Louis Cardinals for a little while. So growing up, watching that and being a part of that ecosystem and stuff, sports were important to me. And I also loved school as well. So those are sort of the two main areas where I spent most of my childhood, like formidable years. And as I went through that, any athlete does, you just sort of do things on a repeated schedule. Like I was always in the backyard working out with my dad, trying to get better. When you get to more formal teams and higher levels of sport, obviously you have practice every day, and I didn't really decide whether or not I was going to go. It wasn't up to how motivated I felt or anything like that, right? You just like show up when you have practice, and you go to the gym when you have lifting, and you go to sprint when you guys have conditioning, and so all that stuff is part of the process. And so I think through that experience of being an athlete, I learned a lot about what consistency and repeated effort can do, what practice leads to over the long run. My sort of MO as an athlete was that I was never the fastest or the strongest or the best person on the team, but I was one of those guys who would just continue to improve a little bit each year. And so I ended up having a pretty good career by the time I got done because I played baseball for 17 years. So it was like, well, after 17 years of work, if you keep getting better each time, of course you're going to get somewhere decent. And that, I think, was probably the main lesson that I was able to take away from that experience. So that's going on one side. And then on the other side, I was studying science. I was a biomechanics major in undergrad, so mostly chemistry and physics. And then when I went to graduate school, I was studying business, but my job, my graduate assistantship, was in the Center for Entrepreneurship. And my job was to analyze all these companies and their venture capital investment and stuff. And when I saw all these people building companies, that was where I kind of got the itch to be an entrepreneur myself. And during those first couple years, I knew nothing. I had no entrepreneurs in my family. I made a bunch of mistakes. But through that process, I had to learn about consumer psychology, behavior change, behavioral psychology, what drives people to make a purchase, what causes people to take an action, what causes someone to pay attention to what a business is doing. And through that little process of studying consumer psychology and consumer behavior, I naturally started learning lessons about habits and behavior that I was able to apply to the other areas of my life. Like, oh, this could have helped me on the baseball field, or this could have been useful for my nutritional habits or my strength training habits now. And that was sort of where the two worlds came together, where I, discovered psychology and all the words that we use now, like habit formation and behavior change and behavioral science. And then I had the practice on the other side from my career as an athlete. And so once those two came together, that was when I kind of got obsessed with it and just went down the rabbit hole and started studying more about it.
Okay. Congratulations, by the way, on making the ESPN in 2008 the All-American selection for baseball. That's a huge achievement.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm assuming was that at the end of your college career, or was that high school?
Yeah, that was after my senior season, so I found out about a week or a week and a half after the season ended.
Okay, and then did you play any ball after that, or did you just kind of go, you know what, I think grad school is what I want to do? And
well, for sure I wanted to. I mean, I definitely wanted to keep playing, but I was a pitcher, and I topped out at about 88, and right-handers who throw 88 are a dime a dozen in the minor leagues. And so if that's what you're throwing and if that's the kind of stuff you have. The other thing is I did have a good college career, but I was at about, let's say 90% of my potential. So if you're someone who's going to draft somebody and you can choose between a 22-year-old who's at 90% of his potential who throws 88 or an 18-year-old who's super raw and throws 88, you're going to take the 18-year-old guy. So I don't think anybody made a bad decision, but I sure would have loved to play as long as I could have.
What team would you have wanted to play for if you could get drafted?
One of my teammates ended up playing for the Cardinals, so it would have been really cool to play with him if we'd have been in there at the same time. That would have been a lot of fun. But there are a lot of great teams. I would have played anywhere. I'd have played for the Yankees, and I don't even like the Yankees, but I'd have played for anybody who gave me a shot.
I think I know the feeling. If I had worked my butt off more and instead of playing video games too much as a kid and played basketball and put my attention on that, I wanted to go to the University of North Carolina because I'm a tried and true Tar Heel. But if anyone had been like, "We'll take you," I probably would have gone.
Yeah.
So to me, I think sports is a really great background for anyone. Because it does help you get into establishing a routine, and you have practice, and there are skills you have to work on, and you got to get better at this skill. I mean, God, I remember I was awful at catching ground balls in baseball, which is why my position of bench was actually probably better. But you've got to make those small steps and get better as you go. So practice is sort of like a routine, and you've written a great book on mastering habits. And as you said, you went to school, you started to learn about habits and the psychology behind it and the behavioral science behind it. But one thing that I thought of while reading a lot of your stuff is, you say if you can master your habits, you can master life, which I think is totally true, because if you can, then you can do almost anything. So what was the hardest habit for you to master as you've gotten out of school or in life?
Oh, well, I mean, there's still a lot of habits that are really hard for me to master now that I master. Master is such a funny word when you're failing with a habit. I mean, okay, so I'll give you two answers. The first answer is, what's the hardest one to master that I actually do have handled now? And I would say that it's working out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I probably have gone 2, maybe 3 years without missing a scheduled workout. If I'm on the road traveling for a week or something, I don't worry about it. But actually have it scheduled, plan on being in there, I haven't missed for a long time now. And that it took me a while to build that habit, especially when I was starting out as an entrepreneur, because you always think, oh, I need to be working harder, and it's really easy to get this irrational skew in your mindset where you're thinking, oh, the solution is work more, not take time off and take care of yourself. And it took me probably a year and a half to like get past that mindset and finally get settled into a pattern where I could really stick with things. But that has been a huge payoff. So that's one that's gone well, but it took me a while to get to it. Thankfully, it was hard for me, and I was in a pretty good position because I had just come off being a collegiate athlete, and I'd been very comfortable training in the gym and had been in there for years. So I didn't, I knew what to do. I just had to build the behavior. The one that I'm really struggling with now is getting to bed early. So I'm a morning person. I perform really well in the morning. I tend to do my best work in the morning. But when I say I'm a morning person, I don't mean that I'm an early riser because I don't cheat myself on sleep. But the problem comes in with, I enjoy my work and I tend to work a lot. So if I'm going to continue working till 11, 12 at night, then all of a sudden I'm not getting in bed early, so I can't get up early because I'm not going to cheat myself on sleep. So that one's been tough. My latest strategy that I've tried to implement to make this happen is to get myself away from the computer because that's the thing that's keeping me up because that's where the work lives. So I have an alarm set on my phone for 10 p.m. every night for when I'm supposed to go read a book. And the last 4 days, 3 of the 4 days, I've been reading when the alarm went off at 10. So it's starting to get better, but for the first couple weeks, it seemed like that wasn't working at all. So we'll see, but that's one that I'm still struggling with.
Yeah, getting to bed early is. I try to get to bed by like 10:30, and there's a small part of my brain that's like, but you're going to bed at like the time your grandfather goes to bed. Like, what are you doing? But I really do. I try to focus on getting like 6 to 7 at least 7 good hours of sleep, because it does help when it comes to recovering from the gym. And we're going to talk about the gym here in just a second. But I wanted to ask real quick, because you mentioned, getting into the habit of going to the gym and thinking, I need to do something that betters myself. And it took you about a year to really get into that. And I know a lot of people may be listening, or a lot of people out there, have started to fall off of their New Year's resolutions and may not be continuing, in the gym or being physically active. So for you, when you were creating that habit, or any time you really create a habit, like what is your process and what are keys you would tell people to help build a habit and sustain it long term?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so there's a few things. The first is there's a study done at University College London where they looked at the length of time that it takes to build a new habit, and they found that, because you'll hear these numbers all the time, it takes 21 days or 30 days or whatever. It turns out that, as you would expect, the length of time it takes varies widely, and it varies based on how big the habit is, how difficult it is, all sorts of factors, your environment, your circumstances. But the range was usually anywhere from, like, say, 18 or 20 days if it was a really small habit, like drinking a glass of water with lunch each day, all the way up to 8 months if it was something really big, like going for a 2-mile run after work every night. And the important thing to realize, though, is that it's going to be a range. The average amount of time is 66 days, so you could, in your mind, you can be thinking on the order of months rather than days. Like, this is going to be a lifestyle that you need to adopt. And I would say that's the first thing, is a mindset shift, that habits are not a finish line to cross where it's like, oh, good, you got here, it's done, you've built this habit now. Habits are a lifestyle or a pattern to commit to. It's literally the results that you have in your life right now are a result of the lifestyle that you live, the actions that you take on a daily basis. And if you want different results, you have to live a different lifestyle, not have a different goal. That's like probably the biggest shift is, goals are great. It's nice to know what direction you're going in, but it's the lifestyle that drives the change, not the goal. The second thing that came out of this study is that not only does it take months to build a new habit, but also they looked at the amount of times that you need to stick with a habit for it to maintain hold, for it to stick with you. And what they found was really interesting. Missing a habit at any one time, whether it's the first day, the 10th day, the 100th day, the 1000th day, missing your habit has no measurable impact whatsoever on whether or not you maintain that behavior for the long run, if you get back on track. That's it. So I think another important caveat is, yes, your lifestyle needs to change, but no, you do not need to be perfect at all. It's not, and habits are not an all or nothing argument. They're not. It's not like, oh, you need to be 100% on, otherwise you totally blew it, which actually is the mindset that you hear a lot of people take when they're looking. Diets are a classic example. It's like, oh, I'm trying to stick to this diet. oh, I blew it. I didn't stick to my diet this morning or this, when I went out to dinner with friends or whatever. So I might as well binge eat because it's over. Well, the research shows that it doesn't actually matter that you blew it when you were with your friends if you have strategies for pulling yourself back on track quickly. And this is what I found the difference is between many top performers. It's not that they don't make mistakes. They make errors and slip up just like everybody else, but they have strategies for pulling themselves back on track more quickly. There's a great book called The Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal, and she's a professor at Stanford, and she talks about why one of the main things that prevents us from having willpower, from sticking to habits for good, is that we don't understand how and why our willpower gets off track, what pulls us off course. And so her argument is write down all of the things that could take you off track. Like, what's the list of things that could derail your willpower? Your kid gets sick, you get in a car accident, you feel exhausted at the end of a long day of work, whatever it all happens to be. If you can prevent those things, great, go ahead and prevent them. If you can't prevent those things, come up with an if-then scenario. If this happens, then I will do X, Y, Z to get back on track later. So as an example, I'm scheduled to work out today. I know I'm going to go to the gym, but let's say something happens where I couldn't go tonight, okay? Well, if that happens, then I know that I'm already scheduled to work out again on Monday. It's already set. I already have a plan to pull me back on course. This is probably the third component of this argument, and one reason why I like schedules a lot for new habits. A lot of people never get around to building a new habit because they're always wondering when they're going to feel motivated to do the habit. So it's like, will I feel excited to work out today? Will I feel motivated to do my writing this morning? Will I feel motivated to eat healthy at lunch today? But if you leave it up to that, the timing is never going to feel right for this new habit. So rather than leaving up to how you feel, start by setting a schedule for yourself. This is, in psychology terms, called an implementation intention, and there are hundreds of studies that cover it. But the basic idea is if you state when and where you plan to implement a new behavior, you're much more likely to stick with that behavior for good. So the classic study that I talk about a lot, it looks at 3 different groups, and they were asking them about their exercise habits. So group 1, they said, over the next 2 weeks, we want you to track how much you exercise. Group 2, they said, we also want you to track how much you exercise over the next 2 weeks. But then they gave them this presentation and some pamphlets to help motivate them, talked about how exercise lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease and so on to try to like prime them to want to work out. The third group, they gave the same presentation to, and they told them to track their exercise for the same amount of time, so they were equally motivated. But then they had them do one more thing that the other groups didn't do. They had to write down on a piece of paper, I will work out on this day, at this time, at this place. When they looked at the 3 groups at the end of the study, group 1, about 30%, 35% or so, ended up working out and sticking to their habits over that span of time in those 2 weeks. Group 2, the motivated group, same exact thing. Motivation didn't do anything at all. 30 to 35% of them worked out over that 2-week span. Group 3, the group that wrote down their implementation intention, when and where they were going to do it, 90% of them worked out over the next 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so this basic idea of just clarifying in your mind when things are going to occur rather than leaving it up to motivation is much more powerful, because motivation, it ebbs and flows. It's fickle throughout the day. We know now that willpower is like a muscle. It can get fatigued the more that you use it. And habits, you don't want them to be fickle. You don't want them to ebb and flow. You want to do them consistently day after day. So if you want to do something consistently, don't rely on something that fluctuates. And one of the best ways to do that is to set a schedule, start with something very small, and have this mindset of it's not all or nothing, it's not 100% or 0. It's something that I can stick to and develop a strategy for if I get off course, how can I get back on track quickly?
That's a great point. And I love that you said, if you somehow don't make it to the gym this afternoon, that you're going to be there Monday. Like you've got that, and you've worked on really solidifying that Monday, Wednesday, Friday is when you work out, which is hard for a lot of people to kind of make that. But even I have to admit for myself, I stick to that plan and make sure I get in the gym on those certain days, no matter what. And if things come up, then I'm in the gym, on Friday or Wednesday or Monday or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So on your website, which is what I love, You mentioned entrepreneur, travel photographer, and weightlifter. So let's talk a little bit about your workout regimen. So what's on the tap today? What are you going to lift today, James?
Okay, so today will be weighted chin-ups, back squat, bench press, and maybe sprints, depending on how the weather is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you stick to like just the basics, like let's say squats, deadlifts, chin-ups, rows, or do you throw in some other things? Do you kind of create your own programs, or is there someone that you follow?
Yeah, okay, so I've done a variety of things at this point. I mean, like in college, most of our strength training was designed around a West Side barbell program, so mostly powerlifting stuff. I've done starting strength and strong lifts. I just finished a small law of squat cycle a couple months ago. So I've tried a variety of different patterns. I've found that at this point I do most of my own programming, but a lot of it's pretty basic, and I've found that I tend to respond well to volume-based stuff. The higher the volume, generally speaking, within some reasonable range. I usually don't do rep ranges of more than 10 reps, but
Right.
generally speaking, higher volume, I seem to respond fairly well to. So it took me a long time to figure that out. It took me probably 5 or 6 years to figure that out, but now that I know that, I tend to fall into those patterns. So like today, squat will probably be like 3 sets of 6, or maybe 4 sets of 5 at 70 or 80%, something like that. So that's usually how I think about it. As far as exercise selection and what I choose, I've come to the conclusion that, and I almost said this when we were talking about habits, you can only have so many priorities, and only one can be your number one priority. And this is true for habits, it's true for behavior change and things that you want to do with your life. It's true in the gym as well. And what I've found is that if I try to focus on everything, like I have one snatch and clean jerk day a week. It's usually on Wednesday. And if I wanted to really focus on technique right now, I could use it. Like I have plenty of places that I could improve with my technique for the Olympic lifts. But I don't have enough physical capacity and energy to be in the gym often enough and recover well enough to focus on technique and to focus on a significant like strength gains. And for me right now, I feel like strength gains would yield the bigger result. So I'm focusing more on building raw foundational strength rather than on technique right now. And as a result, I often arrange my workouts in a way that a lot of the time, if you talk to a really good strength conditioning person, they may not arrange it that way. Usually you organize a workout in response to energy systems. So the most explosive stuff is first, then you move into some more heavier lift stuff, and then rep work at the end. But I'll often put the explosive stuff later or on a completely different day, and start just with whatever my primary goal is. So if right now I'm in this phase of foundational strength is my number one goal, then back squat is the first exercise I do when I get in there, because I want to put my best energy and my best effort toward the thing that's most essential for my goal right now.
Right.
And so that's usually how I think about it. Typically, I'll do somewhere between 3 and 5 exercises a workout, and I have found that I really wish I could train heavy 4 days a week, but if I train more than 3 days, I can handle it for about 4, maybe 6 weeks, and then I start to get run down. And so I guess I have options. I could either do this little cycle, this mini 4-week cycle where I work out really hard and then take the gas off the pedal for the next couple weeks, or I could just find a pattern that I can stick to consistently, which is usually what I do, where I just work out for three days a week and do 3 to 5 exercises a workout.
Okay, cool. And I think that's actually a great point, in that you found out that for you to build a good habit of exercise, you just got to hit, the basic things, and only do 3 days. You've learned that you will get burned out physically and emotionally and neurologically, if you do more than like 3 days a week.
Well, and it's all how you train too, right?
Right.
Like I could, if I wanted to train 6 days a week, sure, I could do something. Like you can, as long as you're smart about it, and like I said, take your foot off the pedal and relax a little bit, have some light recovery days or active rest or whatever. I mean, there's plenty that you could do. You could certainly get to the gym 6 or 7 days a week and be fine if you did it in a smart way. But I can't squat 90% 5 days a week. Just it'll run me into the ground. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. As I've gotten a little older, and granted, I'm only in my late 20s, but even still, like it's very like I can tell from the last couple of years, like recovery takes a little longer than it did even when I was like 27. It's totally weird, but yeah, it's like I'm weird.
Yeah, getting old stinks, man.
So what is your favorite lift? Like, what day do you go in the gym and you're just like, yeah, I'm pumped, I'm ready? Like that. Like, is it back squats right now that you're jiving on?
Yeah, last year squat was probably like if I was going to pick a lift of the year for me, like it was probably squat just because I did so many reps, and I ended up getting much better. So I guess you get excited about what you're good at, and I'd never been good at squat before, but because I focused on it the whole year, it started to excite me because I was continuing to make progress and improve. Right now, I mean, squat's still great. My favorite lift is probably clean and jerk, just because I feel like I could be good at it if I really put a lot of effort into it. I haven't put the same effort into it as I have with squat, but it feels like, oh man, I'm kind of on the cusp and there's some fun potential there. So that's cool. I like that a lot. The one right now that I'm doing more of than I had all last year is bench press, and I'm not built for bench at all. I'm really tall and long, 6'5", 230, so my arms are, way too long for that exercise, but it's really fun to try to get good at that.
Yeah. Well, and as a baseball player, I mean, that's not something that like a pitcher would normally do because that puts your rotator cuff at such a, higher chance of injury than you tear your rotator cuff. That's an injury you don't want to have happen as a pitcher. So, all right. So you mentioned, sometimes things come up and you are, you also you travel a lot. You do speaking engagements. You have beautiful photos, by the way, James. They're
Thank you. I really appreciate
amazing.
that. That's awesome. I want to make that more of a focus in the coming year or two. So it's good to hear that you enjoy it.
Oh, they're gorgeous. I mean, I miss my DSLR. I had to sell it back in like 2008 because I got out of college and no one wanted to hire anyone, so I had to pay bills. But I miss getting out and shooting photos. The one in Scotland was gorgeous, and I swear I'm looking at that photo going, I think I drove on that road on our honeymoon. I think.
Scotland's amazing. I lived there briefly. It's awesome.
Oh, it's wonderful. So when you're on the road traveling internationally, what is your training like? Do you do more like body weight stuff? Do you go out and try and find a park and do just like pull-ups and like inverted rows, or do you find gyms?
Yeah, so I've done all the things that you've mentioned, but I've settled into a pattern that has worked better for me recently. So previously, my strategy was do what you can when you can. If I'm going to be gone for a week or 2 weeks, then let me just try to do the best I can and, maintain whatever I can over that time. So I would do, I took this 14-hour flight to Russia, got off the plane, went to the hotel, did a push-up workout, and then crashed on the bed. I've done sprint workouts in parking lots and, whatever you can do, go ahead and do it. That's fine. That strategy works fine. There's certainly nothing wrong with it. But because my travel is often international and for, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm actually at my home more than I'm on the road. It's not like I'm on the road like every 2 weeks or something. Right. I'd like to do, it usually ends up being more than this, but I would prefer to do like 4 to 6 trips a year and then leave it at that. Now, because of speaking or whatever, there's a lot of one-off 2-3 day trips or whatever that change that. But in an ideal world, that would be my schedule. Like every other month, do like a 1 to 2 week trip for photography stuff. And that pattern allows me to stagger my training a little bit and this only works if you have like really good control of your schedule. And I have pretty good control of it, and it's still hard for me. And I didn't do it. I did it really well for half of last year, but not the second half. And what it is that I'll do a training block for like 8 to 12 weeks, and then I'll stack the travel at the end of that training block when I'm planning on having a deload week anyway, and then I'll go travel for a week or two, come back. Usually I'm walking and hiking a lot because of the photography stuff, so it's very active rest, and then I'll come back and hit the next training cycle and try to do it all over again. That works pretty well, and but the problem comes in with one, soreness. It's unbelievable how sore you can get just by taking like 6 to 8 days off. Like if I have that long off and I come back, the first squat workout's fine, and then 2 days later I feel like it's just like prohibitively sore.
Yeah.
So that's one problem. And then the second is, depending on how the timing works out, if it can get like, say you work out and you finish your workout on a Friday, but then you don't leave for your trip until Monday, and then you're gone for like 2 weeks. All of a sudden, with that additional weekend in on the front and back end, it ends up being almost like 3 weeks that you're gone. And if you have that long that you've gone without lifting, then it actually, I mean, there's a pretty significant strength loss of not being in the gym for 3 weeks. So depending on how things time out, it can set you back a pretty fair amount. I've found that just on a linear scale, so let's say, just to keep the numbers easy, let's say I'm going to bench press 100 pounds, okay? And then the next week I'm planning on going up to 105 pounds. If I were to leave and go on a trip for that week, I found that what I typically need to do if I've taken a full like week to 10 days off is drop whatever the last weight I did, drop by 10%, okay? So when I get back from that trip, if I'm going to drop 10%, I did 100. So rather than going up to 105, which because I had that week off, I should go back down to 90. All right, so I should drop 10% off. Well, now, so I had a week that I missed because of travel. Then I get back, and that next week I do 90. Then I go up another 5 pounds the week after that. So this is 3 weeks out, 95. Then 4 weeks out, I'm back at 100. So even though I did 100 pounds, by missing just 1 week, I've actually set my training back an entire month because I need to drop that 10% from having the week off. And then it took me an additional 3 weeks to get back to where I was. So that when I started to realize that, I thought that, it might be a lot more useful if I could fit just one workout in the middle of the trip, so that if I was gone a week, 4 days out, I could just get one squat session in, so that when I came back, I could do the same weight that I did the week I left, rather than having to drop because of soreness and other stuff. So in an ideal world, that would be my pattern. Train for 8 to 12 weeks, go on a trip, lift once or twice, depending on how long the trip is, in the middle of that trip, then come back and do the same weight that I did when the week that I left and continue training from there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I took a week off for the week of Christmas, because I've had my trapezius and rhomboid like knotted up tighter than Fort Knox, and I could bear like a pull up. Like I got halfway and I couldn't get up. So went and had massagers and took a week off, and then came back, and I had like one chest workout, and the next day I was like, oh my god, why does it feel like I just got like 3 years ago when I started lifting weights? Why is it that sore?
Yeah, you get sore so fast.
Yeah, it does. But then like after a couple of days, you're back at it, and everything's back to normal. So a couple fun questions real quick. So what is your favorite place that you've been to shoot photography, and what's the one place you are dying to get to take shots at?
Okay, favorite place that I've shot so far is Morocco. It was amazing. But yeah, I did that. I did a 2-week trip there last year, and it was just awesome. Awesome street photography, awesome landscapes, awesome cityscapes, and just really, really cool culture. The place that I'm dying to get to for landscapes, it would be New Zealand. For street photography, I don't know. That's tough. I hear great things about Buenos Aires, so I would love to go to Argentina.
Yeah, I think those two are, my wife and I have like a sort of travel bucket list, and New Zealand is like number one, mostly for me, so I can be like, yay, I'm in the Lord of the Rings, yay! That's about it. And then the only one is in like Tunisia, because I have to go to the Skywalker like Star Wars museum thing. Like I have like that as a giant Star Wars nerd, that has to happen.
Right.
So those are two for mine. But yeah, New Zealand is just, it's amazing how beautiful that it is. It's just it's mind blowing because you watch Lord of the Rings and you're like, oh, it's CG. No, that's New Zealand. Oh my God.
Yeah, it looks unbelievable.
Okay, so what guilty pleasure is on your workout mix that if people were to hear, like that you would be ashamed to tell anyone is on your workout mix?
That's funny. Well, so the gym that I go to, I don't wear earbuds or bring an iPhone or anything. They play music, so I don't get, they don't let me control the radio, I guess. But if they did, and occasionally a Taylor Swift song will come on, so I'll claim that. You can usually find me dancing to that in between a set.
You are not the first person to say that Taylor Swift or like Katy Perry is on their workout mix. I haven't. You know what? Maybe I need to do it next week. I need to put them on. I'm afraid that I'm going to say I like it. Like that's my thing. Like
right.
I'm afraid I'm going to be like I'm going to come home and go, honey,
man. Taylor knows what she's doing.
All right. If you could have dinner with one famous person from history, who would it be?
Oh man, there are so many great options. I wish I could say more than one, but I'll say Mark Twain.
Okay, why Mark Twain?
I think he's hilarious. Some of his quotes and some of the way that he looks at the world. So I get this image in my head between what he writes about and like the way that he phrases things, this amazing like walrus mustache that he has, and the fact that he sits like around smoking out of a pipe or this amazing cigar. I just am like, this guy has to be an amazing person to share a meal with. I mean, he's got to have like whatever you're talking about, whatever the latest news of the day is or something. He would have to have an amazing opinion or angle on it. So I feel like that would be very interesting. From an intellectual standpoint, though, I would say Richard Feynman, famous physicist. I would love to just, I don't know, I would love to just be with him for an hour. I think it would be really, really cool to learn from him.
All right. Okay. So going back a little bit more to habits and whatnot, just for a couple minutes. So habits. So I want to ask: is there a difference between like routines and habits, or is it really just the same thing, like the same word with two words with the same meaning?
Yeah, it's a good question. They actually are different. So we often use them interchangeably. This can make stuff kind of complicated and complex when it comes to you'll see like a journalist put out an article on habits or something, and it kind of gets misconstrued, the findings of a lot of these studies. So the basic idea in the scientific term, a habit is a behavior that can be performed automatically without conscious thought. Like it more or less just happens, like biting your nails or scratching your head or brushing your teeth, things that usually happen in 30 seconds or less or a second or less. Automatic behaviors that are just primed into you, ways that we respond to things. Looking at the sun and blinking, stuff like that. That's almost more like a biological reflex, but on the psychological side. So that's a habit. A routine is something that you do consistently as a pattern, like going to the gym, right? Going to the gym for an hour technically is never going to be a habit. You're not going to go to the gym and just go unconscious for an hour and not remember what you did and just do this sequence of things without having to think about it or without needing any motivation or willpower. But right. The secret here is that those routines that we go through, they can often be primed by habitual things, by ritual and routine, by things that we do in the beginning that allow this like cascade of actions to follow. So I'll give you an example. Every time I go to the gym, I have a little routine that I follow. Very simple. Take my lifting shoes out, put them on, put on my knee sleeves, put on wrist wraps, and do 10 squats without the bar, 10 squats with the bar. That's the routine. Takes 3 to 5 minutes. But by the time I'm done with that routine, it's like a little automatic trigger in my brain, a little switch that goes off that says, hey, remember this? Time to work out now. And so it's easier for me to get myself in the right mental state to work out because I have this automatic ritual, this automatic habit that I do every time I go. So by making it more mindless in the beginning, I'm allowing myself to like get into this habit of, I show up at the gym. I don't even have to think about what to do for the first 3 to 5 minutes. I just do the same thing every time. And then the motivation and the willpower and the conscious thought and behavior and routine follow after that. So that's kind of how I think about merging them together, but technically they are different things.
Okay. Yeah, routines, anytime like someone mentions a routine, what kind of always pops in my head is I went to North Carolina basketball school in high school, and I showed up at the foul line and just shot. There was no like ceremony beforehand, and one of the things they taught us was like create a ceremony, create a routine.
Yeah.
So I created a routine. It took probably 15 seconds, and everyone was like, "Dear God, just shoot the ball."
Right.
But crazy enough, my free throw percentage went from 48% to like 85% the next season, just by like creating that routine.
I like that word, ceremony. That's good. It's like it's a good way of thinking about it. Like that's kind of your ceremony. It sounds like may have been a little long for everybody else, but that's the thing, right? Like how can you create this ritual, this tradition out of your new behavior and use that to drive the rest of what you need to do?
Yeah, and it totally works. Totally works. And I love that you're like, I take my shoes out, I put them here. I don't know if I have a routine. My routine is get the heck out of work as quick as I can because I want to get to the gym and lift. That's probably my routine. So I know a lot of people out there in the world are writing about routines and creating routines and do this routine. Like you said, they're trying to make routines habit, but there is an actual scientific difference in the definition between them. Do you have like a morning routine? Like, what is your morning? What are your morning habits?
Yeah, good question. This is probably an area that I could optimize and improve, but I've done a fairly decent job. So the thing that's made the biggest difference for me in the morning has been removing the distractions that pull me off course. So you can approach this problem from two different angles, right? So the first angle is what I just described with my weightlifting. So this is like the proactive angle where you're like, all right, what is the ritual or the routine or the ceremony that will pull me into this activity, right? So you're focused on moving forward into it. The other angle is what are the things that prevent me from doing this activity? How can I get rid of those? So when it comes to my morning routine, that's where I've done a better job. So for example, I wake up, get dressed, take a shower, and then the first thing that I do is go settle into doing some creative work for the next like 3 to 4 hours, all right? Strategic work, creative work. Well, during that time, I typically never check email until about noon each day, 11 or noon, somewhere around there, all right? So this is one distraction that could immediately pull me away. Like a lot of people, before they wake up, I was talking to a buddy the other day, he was like, every day I wake up, my alarm goes off on my phone, I pull it up and I immediately check Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then I start getting messages about the emails that I'm getting already. Okay, so he hasn't even made it out of bed yet, and he's already being interrupted by all of the competing agendas that other people have in his life, things that he needs to do at work, what people are up to on social media, and so on. You can't forget something once you know it. So if you wake up and your mind is filled with the urgencies and emergencies of everybody else, it's really hard to operate on your own agenda. So I try to, as much as I can, restrict those things from getting into my life when I'm doing focused work. So I leave my phone in another room on vibrate or on silent, so I don't get any text messages or calls. I don't check email until about noon, so that helps eliminate that. Typically, I'm in a room where I'm by myself and it's quiet. Now, some people like to work with music, whatever, that's fine. I prefer silence for the most part. Sometimes I'll have music on. And then typically the thing that makes the single biggest difference on whether or not I have a really productive morning or not is if I decided what the main task is that I should be working on the night before. If I have it picked out the night before and I can sit down and just start working, it's way easier for me to have a productive day. If I have to sit down and decide what the most important thing is then, I can spend, and I have done this many times, I will spend 4 hours trying to figure out what to do. And so those are probably the things that most dictate my morning routine.
Yeah, morning. I know a lot of people who, even people I work with, they are sending emails. Like I get to work and I have an email at like 5:45, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you? No, you should. No, why are you sending emails at 5:45? Like, if the computer is the first thing you check in the morning, and you're looking at all of those, the social media things that you said, all of a sudden your brain sort of like cortisol like goes up, and you start worrying about all this stuff, and you can't focus on what you have to do for the day. I know, honestly, one of my morning routines, and I've kind of got off track with it, mostly because I'm taking I'm in the process of getting my personal trainer certification, so I've been getting up and like studying and trying to make sure I'm ready for that. But since high school, I used to just watch, like, get coffee and watch SportsCenter. Like, that was my morning routine. But it allowed me to sit there, and yes, it was moving images that came in my head, but it allowed me in a way to sort of kind of like center myself and be ready. I did for a while try and get up and do some yoga and meditation, but I failed at creating that habit.
Yeah. Just on this idea of like digital interruptions or whatever. My home screen on my phone actually only has icons for phone, text message, and notes. And everything else is on the next screen. So when I open up my phone, I don't have any visual cues pulling me away into another app. For a while, I deleted social media from my phone. I did that for like a month just to get out of the habit of using it all the time.
Right.
And now it's on a separate screen and also in a separate group. So I have to open up the group of apps and then get in there to open the social media stuff. So I don't see the visual cue. And that's a similar strategy that I use on my computer. So my desktop has no icons on it, and my dock automatically hides, so I don't see any other apps or programs that I should be opening while I'm working. And I tend to do my best work in full screen mode. So like I do a lot of my writing in Evernote, so I'll maximize Evernote so it's full screen. And when you don't have any visual cues prompting you to go like click on something or click on another tab or go to Twitter or whatever, it's a lot easier to ignore that stuff. So kind of take the digital distractions out of your life by designing the environment to have fewer distractions in it.
Oh, I totally agree. That I'm doing that. I'm going to move everything to one screen and ignore all of that, because you're right. Like, it's weird how these social media things almost in a way create this habit of like, I gotta check it, I gotta look, and no matter what, you're gonna look, which is an interesting phenomenon in and of itself, that we've kind of become so attached to checking things that don't change that often, but we're somehow checking Facebook every 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And it does kind of create that weird own kind of bad mental habit, if you will. So just a couple more questions before you wrap up, because I know we only got a few more minutes. I think it's always kind of hard for anyone to create a habit. And like you said, it can take months or a long span of time, and you have to look at it as a lifestyle change, which is very hard to look at that way, because as human beings, we evolved with homeostasis. Like we want to stay in one area. We want, constant, we don't need change. We don't want all of these crazy things happening. Our bodies are always looking for homeostasis. So how do you help people like break those mental hurdles? Like, what do you teach people to get over those hurdles and be able to change their habits and make their life better, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's finances, or whatever the habit may be?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing is to start with something that's much smaller than you would imagine. So the phrase that Leo Babauta talks about is so easy that you can't say no to it. And BJ Fogg often mentions this idea of tiny habits, things that you can do in under 60 seconds or under 30 seconds, and using that to drive your behavior and your choices. So, for example, say you want to develop a push-up habit of doing 50 push-ups a day. Well, that's great, but you probably can't do 50 push-ups in under 30 seconds. So you should start much smaller. So for me, I was actually working toward this habit, and I started with just 10 push-ups the first day. And so I made it very, very tiny. Now, this comes back to our previous conversation about implementation intentions and knowing when and where you're going to do a new behavior. So you have to pick what BJ Fogg, professor at Stanford, calls a trigger for the behavior. And so for me, the trigger was I close my laptop to go to lunch, and then I do my 10 push-ups. So it's very specific thing, right? Like when this happens, then I do the push-ups. Not at lunch or around lunch or sometime during the day, but like at this specific time, this thing happens. One that's worked really well for me on that is a gratitude habit. I wanted to build gratitude and gratefulness into my life. So the habit is when I sit down for dinner, I say one thing I'm grateful for that happened that day. And it's so funny, one, how often you say things that like don't cost money or have nothing to do with material wealth or anything like that. But then also on an individual basis, saying one thing you're grateful for, not that big of a deal. But on a cumulative basis of all always having something to say every single day, that's been a huge win. And over the course of, I've done that for over 2 years now, and it's awesome. I think I'm going to do it forever. So that one's so that's one thing, is start really, really small and pick a very specific trigger, a very specific time or action when that new small behavior is going to occur. The second thing that you can do is put all your energy towards starting the behavior. So often in our mindset is focused on the scope of the whole behavior, right? Like, I want to get home from work and I want to run 3 miles. And all you're thinking about is, man, I'm so exhausted from work. 3 miles is such a lot of, distance to run. It feels so overwhelming when you get back from this exhausted day at work. Rather than putting your energy and your mindset toward the scope of the whole action, put it all toward beginning the behavior. And the rule that I talk about is called the 2-minute rule, and it's adjusted from the original 2-minute rule is from David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, and it's like a productivity hack. Like, if something takes less than 2 minutes, do it now. So washing the dishes from your meal, or throwing the laundry in, or writing, calling somebody back that you, writing a thank you note, or calling somebody back that you've been delaying, getting in touch with, whatever. It takes less than 2 minutes, do it right away. Well, you can take that same strategy and apply it to habits. Rather than worrying about the scope of your 3-mile run, all that you should put your energy and effort toward is, how can I start in the next 2 minutes? And so the only thing you need to do is put your running shoes on, fill up your water bottle, step out the door, close the doorknob. That's it. You do that, it doesn't even matter if you run another step. That's considered success. The only thing you're focused on are the first 2 minutes. But as we know, motivation often comes after starting, not before. So if you can get your shoes on and get yourself out the door, then it's often easier to stick with a habit for the long run.
Yeah, I think those are great, really great points. Especially the gratitude thing. A lot of my listeners know something my wife and I have been practicing probably since right after our wedding. Is before we go to bed each night, we have to tell each other 2 good things that happened that day, so that we start focusing. Instead of like, oh God, this horrible thing, you start looking for the positive, slowly but surely. And then something I tell people a lot of time is, try and just make today 2% better than yesterday. If you can just move small, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant 1 bite at a time.
Right.
If you take those small steps, eventually you don't even realize that you're halfway up the mountain, and you look down and go, oh wow, I came a really long way. So yeah, that's something I try to do in my own life as well.
Yeah, that's great.
So a couple more fun questions before we close down, and then I'll let you tell a little bit about where people can find you at. Sure. If you could be any superhero, who would it be and why?
Does Batman count as a superhero?
See, yes, I agree, because I get into this debate with people all the time, because I think Batman is very much like Iron Man. He's a guy with a lot of money and has a lot of cool tools, so he doesn't have like superhuman power.
Be a superhero, but I think I would choose Batman, probably for that very reason, because he's so real, and it's so possible.
Right.
That makes me sound completely delusional, but.
Who knows? Elon Musk could pop up one day and be like, I am Iron Man. His SpaceX thing is really him building an Iron Man suit.
Right, yeah, Bruce Musk.
Okay. If your life was turned into an action movie, all right, who would play you? Like, what action movie star would you want to play James Clear?
Oh, man. You have no idea how much I'm the wrong person to ask this question, because I'm so bad with celebrity names. Like to the point where the names that are popping in my head are people that would make no sense to play me, like Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, and like people that have no reason to be. What's the name of the guy who played Thor? That'd be pretty awesome.
Chris Hemsworth.
Yep, yeah, that'd be pretty sweet. I'd like to be that big. And also to have hair, that would be
I was gonna say you have that Jason Statham look going on, so maybe
actually, so that's probably, honestly, if we're picking the most appropriate person based on looks, that's probably the person that we have to choose, because I've actually been mistaken for him 1 or 2 times. So if that's the case, then I guess we got to go with Jason Statham.
Okay, all right. So question I always love asking everyone, because I love finding out the process of people and trainers that I normally talk to and people who have come a long way in their life and advice they can give to anyone. And a lot of the times there are people that inspire us that we are grateful for and have got us to where we were either through a class or meeting or a book that they had. So who inspires you, James, and how have they affected you, and what books would you suggest from that person?
Well, there are a wide range of people. So I guess the first thing is I don't think it's good to idolize any one individual. So I am super inspired by a variety of people in very narrow areas. So for example, photography. Steve McCurry's work, unbelievable, super inspiring to me, like very aspirational work for me. There's a young photographer named Chris Burkard that I look at a lot, love his stuff. Brandon Stanton, the guy behind Humans of New York, from like an entrepreneurial service photography perspective, incredibly aspirational for me to see the difference that he's making with his work and be like, you really need to step up your game. So those are some people that I look to for that stuff. There are a range of entrepreneurial friends that I have, people that names that most people wouldn't know that are close friends of mine that I look up to for various business reasons. As far as writing goes, the most recent person, and you asked for a book, John Krakauer, who wrote Into Thin Air. This book is maybe the greatest nonfiction book I've ever read. Like from a writing perspective, I would love to create something that is this great someday. So that's super aspirational for me and someone that I look to from like a quality of writing and storytelling standpoint. He's also an adventurer and a mountain climber and stuff. So I'm not a mountain climber myself, but I think it's always cool for me to resonate with someone who has like a very athletic tilt to what they do. So those are a range of people. As far as fitness stuff goes, I find that I respect a lot of people that I've had as strength coaches and things like that, but I don't necessarily find myself like aspiring to hit so I have a friend who squats over 500 pounds. I would like to squat over 500 pounds to see if I have that potential, to see if I could reach that, but I don't necessarily view him as aspirational because he can do that, if that makes sense. Like I'm not, for when it comes to physical feats of fitness, I don't find that I'm chasing someone else's number as much as I'm, inspired by the way that people go about their work or the way that someone goes about their craft.
Right.
But those are some good suggestions, and Into Thin Air is an amazing book.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like I want to squat more, but I also got to the point where I was like, I can't fit in my jeans. All right, that's it. I can't. I don't want to go any higher, and then my legs get any bigger. Like. I got a tailor-made suit for my wedding that my best man bought me. Like, I have to wear that for a long time, Yeah. Well, James, if people are interested in you and they want to find out, more about you, where can they find you, and where can they get your book, to learn about how to implement changing habits into their own life?
Sure. Well, so thanks for having me on. JamesClear.com is where I write every Monday and Thursday. I'll put up new articles about habits, behavior change, creativity, a lot of the stuff that we talked about throughout this conversation.
Right.
If you're looking for the best place to start on building new habits, the science of how habits work, and then just some practical strategies for behavior change, I put together a guide. It's a free PDF you can download. It's about 45 pages called Transform Your Habits, and you can download that at jamesclear.com/habits.
Okay. Awesome. Well, James, again, thank you so much for coming on, guys. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please check out James online. His book is amazing. All of his work is really great. So, James, I want to thank you again for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
No problem.